in time for the review of Sri Lanka at Human Rights Council in September 2015. The period investigated was from February 2002 to November 2011. Now let us look at what the OISL report is really trying to do. OISL report says it is a human rights investigation, not a criminal one. But its findings are directed towards a war crimes investigation against Sri Lanka army. This report openly advocates hybrid special courts and foreign judges for the investigation as well. The OISL report is not an impartial report, if that is our point of view. The evidence in the OISL report is seriously flawed, characterized among other things by contradictions, omissions, lies, half-truths, and also lacking in consideration of evidence. The culminative effect, which is that the report fails to establish, is primary claim that the state is responsible for war crimes and other series of crimes allegedly committed during the relevant period. This OISL report, in brief, shows 7 charges against Sri Lankan government, 3 under international humanitarian law and 4 under international human rights law. We are going to discuss here today about the charges under international humanitarian law. These charges under international humanitarian laws are impact on hostilities on civilians and civilian objects, denial of humanitarian assistance to civilians in the conflict, and the third one is unlawful killings. The panel here today is Mr. Rajyatha from Global Sri Lankan Forum, United Arab Emirates, and Mr. Subindra Ranatunga from Global Sri Lankan Forum, Ireland, and I am Jayawat Palewala from United Kingdom. Our organization specially appointed a legal team to investigate into the allegations leveled against us in the OISL report. We appointed a special legal panel headed by legal expert Darshan Veerasekara and been authorized by, sanctioned by some other jurists as well as legal experts. And they prepared a comprehensive report called rebuttal report answering all these allegations against Sri Lanka in the OISL report. So what we are based here today is based on the grounds and the answers leveled against us and the answers in the OISL report, allegations in the OISL report and the answers in the rebuttal report. We are referring all these 2 reports in our discussion here today. My colleague Ajant Premaratne is going to analyze the first charge, that is impact of hostilities on civilians and civilian objects. I do invite Mr. Ajant Premaratne to start his presentation on this subject.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Yaraj, for the quick introduction. Today, my part of the presentation is impact of hostilities on civilians and the civilian object. Under OISL report, they have given 2 areas of this event. They mentioned that indiscriminate shelling on civilians on the fire zone and shelling on hospital and the other areas. We want to explain how this panel has misguided the UNHRC. They mentioned that they have got the information from the military analysts who examined witness testimonies and report received from diplomatic sources and NGOs and others. And on the medical ground, they said there are 5 medical facilities, and they said they got information from the estimate of its direction of travel of the ammunitions and the type of weapon being used by the Sri Lankan army, and they determine the direction and type of fire assess on the damage. That's the way they came to conclusion that Sri Lankan army has attacked the civilians and killed more than 40,000 damaged civilians. We tried to today explain to the audience that the 40,000 killing allegation is the myth, it's not the fact of the ground. That's the way we're going to start today. One can look at the testimony outside the observers where we in the field all the time. I mean, the OSR report has taken from the information from the outsiders, like diplomats who never been to the battlefield, and some of the NGOs never been in Sri Lanka before the wartime. They never told the LTT terrorists to take the human and the Tamil people, human shield out of the fire zone area or the war. But they came all of a sudden after 18th of May, and they said 18,000 to 40,000 or sometimes 120,000 Tamil students has been killed. It's a real myth, and we totally refute that incident, that statement. We have 4 to 5 way to prove that this 40,000 is a myth. Method one is we have Sri Lankan Census Department details in 2005-2009. The total death is 22,000, out of which 9,000 for 11,000 in 2009 year, natural death, and 7,900 as well as death, accident, homicide, and suicide, etc. If you take out all those things out, the balance is 3,000. The 3,000, the one unaccounted for, out of the 3,000, there are at least 75% belong to the LTT Tamil terrorists. Rest are the civilians that could happen during the first fires. This is the method number one. We want to refute that 40,000 is a real myth. Second one is there is a UN report in 2009. It says that gives an estimate of number of persons killed between August 2008 and May 2013 is 7,200. This is not. Yes, it will be after this. We can have So give me a second. Okay, so I have 15 minutes. Sorry.
Can I go back to the slide? I just want to take.
No, I'll come back. Okay. So this is the method number 2, where we use the UN report itself says only 7,000. No way mentioned 40,000. Then go to the method number 3. That says there is a study by the American Association of Advance of Science of Aerial Photograph. They found 3. The purpose of the study was to find out, among other things, if there were evidence of rapid expansion of gravities, evidence of mass graves, which could indicate that large number of people were in fact being killed. In fact, they found little or no expansion of gravities and no evidence of mass graves leading to that large number of civilians were being killed. This came from the American Association of Advanced Science. They got their technology they use, and they got the aerial program, and to see whether there are mass graves of 40,000. It's not the simple 10,000 or 1,000 bodies. So 40,000 bodies should be somewhere you can locate easily through the GPS or the navigation, but they couldn't find it. The fourth method is there are a number of associations, NGOs, and the government and the various individuals has given various numbers. If you go through these numbers, there are various from 3,000 to 10,000 to 100,000. But if you get the average, the idea is there are the numbers quoted by locally Sri Lankan-based association, including LTT Tamil terrorists, are in the region of 7,500. Nowhere close to this 14,000 myth, right? Then the 40,000, 10,000 quoted by foreign organizations and the foreign funded local and individual NGOs. That's one of the fact we have for method to prove that this organization, all those things, you can see the numbers, 40,000, 40,000, and one number 3, American one says 7,000, and Tamil says 7,900, survey by the government 7,400, and the other ones in Tamil universities, previous one say 3,000, so on. If you go to that one, it is around 7,000. The good one is the Tamil, which is the LTT's official website. Almost they reported war day by day, hour by hour, and every attacks, every things they have taken. This shows if you go to the death in January, only 331, February 1,100, and the March 1,700, April 3,800, May 4,400. The total is 11,600. If you take out the confusion areas and the non-verified by the UN, this comes to 7,200. The 7,200, which include to some extent LTT terrorists themselves. So here again, they prove that it is not 40,000. You can take maximum is 11,000. But our assessment is it is 7,000. We are close to the 40,000. These are the 5 methods. This is the various people. In fact, the Bishop Rayapu, one of the strongest LTT terrorist supported. He said around 140,000 were killed, and there were chemical attacks, all those things. And they came up with that way, and the Channel 4 said 145,000. That's the way people came up. But we came to know it's a number game. There is no way 40,000 Tamil civilians were killed. They are our brothers and sisters. The army never killed. So my next point is, who was hostile to Tamil civilians? It is none other than the LTT Tamil terrorists. I will prove that point. There are places, the OSR report itself says, available information suggested that LTT put in place physical measure to prevent people from leaving its control. Whose control? LTT Tamil terrorists control area, including the creation of checkpoint and sentry points. On 9th of February 2009, a female suicide bomber, LTT bomber, crossed over and blew herself up at the IDP registration point in Madu, killing number of soldiers, at least 8 civilians. This is the way they keep the Tamil civilians as human shield, and they never allow the Tamil civilians to flee from the LTT hands, and they keep as a target for their covering. The UN, United Nations spokesman in Sri Lanka at the time was stated, UN deploy attack that killed and ended the lives of the innocent civilian by LTT, especially those failing in the fighting. You can see it's not the Sri Lankan government. Sri Lankan government always try to save this Tamil civilian from LTT hand, but LTT themselves, they hold these civilians and try to expose to them as a human shield. Again, John Holmes, the briefing to the Security Council on the humanitarian situation in Sri Lanka, 2009, he mentioned, he was the UN representative at the time in Sri Lanka, he mentioned many of these people have been displaced many times in recent months. Yes, they started from the Jaffna, Kilnochi, Parantan. They took all these civilians all the way from all the area of the northeast Sri Lanka up to the small strip called Pudumataran. They kept there as hostages, but they now face with great danger from fighting between Sri Lankan government forces and the LTT. And there is strong evidence, explained by UN experts, that LTT are preventing them from leaving. So who did the hostiles to these Tamil? It's not the Sri Lankan government, but LTT Tamil terrorists itself. But during this time, strange enough, neither Tamil politicians or the NGOs who funded by the foreign government, supported by the other Tamil diaspora, never pressurized, never requested, never make any demand to LTT to release these Tamil civilians. They kept as a human shield. Now they point the finger against Sri Lankan government as they killed 40,000 Tamil civilians. This is utterly lie. Other one, their LTT Carter, she was one of the leaders of the LTT terrorist organization. Her in books mentioned that I saw that Vidusha, one of the LTT terrorists, was under tremendous mental strain, and they began to cry when I went near her. I ashamed that I'm thinking of the organization now. This was written her book called The Shape of Edge of Soul. I have no answers to the question of these sisters posed. She said, with such frustration, acknowledged, I had never seen in her before. The people are going to the SLM, Sri Lankan Armed Forces, Sri Lankan Army, because there's nothing left to do. The organization has ordered, organization has ordered the people so leaving be shot below the knees. This is by Prabhakaran himself ordered to their cadres, their members, to shoot the Tamil civilians who are fleeing from their bridge. my God, how can I order this girl to shoot these people? We should have telling to the Tamil. This all mentioned is her book, published in Tamil, Sinhala and English 3 languages. It is there. This is one of the classic example where LTT hold the Tamil civilian as human shield. It's not the Sri Lankan government. Sri Lankan forces, all they wanted to free these Tamil civilians out of these terrorists. Other one, the Muraliya Reddy, he is the frontline Tamil, frontline Indian medicines author. He was in the frontline, one of the journalists. He was there all the time in the wartime. He mentioned that the May 15 decision IRCR's insight was shown until 4 days before the war ended. The suspect humanitarian operation inside Tiger Head Territory proved beyond doubt about that majority of civilians were out of the battle zone. Since he had opportunity to actually interact with the civilians, he also reasonable to presume that it would have been an opportunity to ask them directly what knew in such massacres. The point is, the OICR team never contacted Muraliya Reddy to get the information. He was on the ground, he was in the battlefield throughout the session until the 15th of May, but never contacted by this OSL team, but they went to the people who had never been in the battleground. Then David Gray, Reuters report, he also mentioned that he was being taken to a tour of the war zone area. He never seen anywhere the mass scale of killing. If it is 40,000, you would have seen the body every corner, every center, left and right. But he never mentioned, as a Reuters reporter, he saw that mass scale of killing anywhere in the battleground. Those are the areas, the 5 people mentioned that there is no such kind of mass killing in the battlefield. Is that the sort of behavior would have expected from the soldier? That's what his opinion. It's a myth international community to play with the geopolitics. The 40,000 number brought by the international community to play the geopolitics in Sri Lanka. It's a myth by Tamil diaspora for their personal existence. Unless this kind of things, they cannot exist in the Western world or the North America or the Australia. They need to have something to take it and sell in front of the international community, which is the 40,000 death. That is, they call so-called genocide, war crime, all those things. These are part of myth, part of the personal existence by the Tamil diaspora and the geopolitics played by the international community. And it's a myth by the Tamil politician for their cheap political gains in Sri Lanka and in Tamil Nadu. The last part of my one shilling of hospital, I go quickly. There are 5 hospitals they taken as allegation being hit by the Sri Lankan government, the BTK, Modivaikal, these are the places. And the OSL's report said that on the basis of this information, OSL does not therefore have reasonable ground to believe there were legitimate military targets inside the hospital. Yes, there was no evidence to say the legitimate target to attack hospital. This is the common sense of any government, any army. But OSL state, however, there are reasonable ground to believe LTT launched attack from the close proximity of hospital. They knew that when they attack from the close to hospital, there will be retaliation from the Sri Lankan government. It may not be accurate enough to the attack to the artillery position of the LTT, but may be hit to the hospital. That's the way they would provocate and get the international attention. OSL stated further, in doing so, LTT failed to comply with its obligation to take all feasible precautionary measures to protect all the civilian population from the attacks. They provoked the Sri Lankan army by attacking the Sri Lankan army with the very close proximity of the hospital and the all relevant areas. That's the one we do it. Again, the panelists engaged in the deliberately misguided overture by the victim launch an attack from inside the hospital opposed to the in close proximity. Mean again they provoked the Sri Lankan government. We identify following to prove it otherwise. Panel report says so there were attack close to the hospital by the LTT. Recent Learned and Reconciliation Commission report says no attack to hospital, and the report by OCR said no attack to the hospital directly, but indirect attacks. And the University Teachers Human Rights JAPTA, they say there's no direct attack to hospital. WikiLeaks says so, there's no such attack to the hospital directly, but the indirect attack could be. And the more strong argument is affidavit given by Dr. Shanmuga Raja, Medical Superintendent of the Multi General Hospital in January to May 2009. He strongly believed that, he strongly gave the witness as a factual witness, on the ground witness. He mentioned that there's no any direct attack to the hospital. If they were all indirect attack, most of the attack when it was happened, the hospital was empty. The patient has been taken away. So our point is that there's no attack to the hospital indirectly. Directly attack, there were maybe direct attack because of the provocation by LTT itself. According to Dr. Shanmuganathan, although they were supposed to be happened one attack or at the time of the attack happened, no patient on the hospital. These are the 2 points I'm going to prove today. I'll hand over my session to Mr. Suminder to take up the next part of the session. Thank you very much.
Before Suminder starts, I would like to mention that apart from three of us from Global Sri Lankan Forum, we have independent researcher and the scholar Professor Dr. Hemant Sukutasel with us. So after all our presentations, he's going to summarize and give his view as an independent researcher, give his views in regards to what we are talking about here today. And I think we better do it at the end. Otherwise you won't go to, you will be able to finish it.
Because I cannot remember everything in my head.
Please write it down.
Yeah.
Please write it down.
I just want to clarify something. Just ask you a question.
Don't do that. Otherwise we are not going to finish.
Okay, wait. Just.
Doctor,
Your name is?
sorry, my name is Manivandan.
Okay.
Yes, you have stated, okay, you are saying all that, this is that one and this one is wrong.
Yeah.
But the Raipu figure was, the Reverend Raipu figure was based on the fact, the Reverend Raipu figure was based on the fact that 425,000 was present in that area, particular area. It was collected for the food, for the how much the things had to be sent to it's collected by your Grammar Service and everybody. This information has been collected, 425,000. And then he based this out, because it was in the LLRC report, you can see it. And then it came out, and then he said about 299,000 only came out.
Yeah.
So he's saying that this amount of people have been lost.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
and also
450 minus 290, 140.
yeah, 140 he was
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
that is one of the things.
Yeah,
So that has not been addressed up to now by even any Sri Lankan government.
And
It
even
does
UN,
not-
and even
okay, that has not been. But the UN have got 40,000
Yeah.
from the aerial photographs and all
Yeah.
that, and then it was marked up to 70,000. Anyway, we had to be fair. There was zero civilian casualty
No.
in.
No.
This was Rajapaksa says zero civilian casualty. So now you are coming out and saying something. Okay, let us investigate. That is what we want the International Criminal Court to be involved, to be investigated properly. It doesn't matter whether it is 140,000
Agreed.
or is it 7,000.
As civilians,
It doesn't
we should do it,
matter.
yes.
But as far as we are concerned, we want some independent. This is not about, we shouldn't play politics here. I am not here to play. I am a human rights advocate. That I want justice for our people. That is what I am here for. It's
Right.
not about whether you want that or this. It's not about. Whatever happening, the country have got second largest disappeared people in the government should be ashamed not to even prosecute one person.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying? He's not playing about politics here. See, the problem is that we have to think about it. If you are going to go on attacking each other, like you are saying, oh, Tamils are that, and we are saying on the other side, that ones are that, and we are not here, because the problem, the issue is that we have to address the issue. The issue is that justice and accountability. Without justice and accountability, yeah, I'm finishing.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Without justice and accountability, no longer if we talk among ourselves.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you are talking among yourself now, or very few people there.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. I have to go up. Thank you very much for the time. But be fair. That's what I can say.
So,
Thank you very
I would
much.
like to thank you for being a counter-terrorist, because it's an obligation here to be a counter-terrorist.
Counter-terrorism has been used to kill people off. It has been used in all the countries, you know, and I know. I have been working here.
Yeah, counter-terrorist or not?
See,
Counter-terrorist or not?
no, I have worked in that field.
Yeah.
All right? Thank you.
Thank you, okay.
Actually, because as an advocate, I had to be known about most of the things.
That's what you must
Thank you.
ask Sri Lankan.
Thank you. I have to go to the this side.
Thank you. Well, actually, what we are doing here today is that we are just bringing details about the OISL report, because that report has been just biased. That is the reason why we are here today, to explain the reasons why we should not accept their report. So, it's my the topic here today is to talk about there's an allegation made by the OICL, the denial of humanitarian assistance to civilians in the conflict zone. So, the denial of humanitarian assistance to civilians. As you know, this is the charge that we have been forwarded to, is that during the last phase of the war, the government pursued a policy of deliberately denying humanitarian assistance to the civilians trapped in the conflict zone. So failure to, what happened was, the OISL just completely failed to consult the delegates who had the first-hand knowledge about the phase of the war. The main people were the Neil Boning, the United President's coordinator in Sri Lanka, Mr. Robert Blake, the US ambassador at that time, Mr. Sukuma, Anne-Marie Sukuma, the government agent of Mulathi. So none of these people had been consulted by the OISL to get the first-hand information, because they have been there at the time of this, the last phase of the war. We are just denying the charge the OISL made against us, because we had a mechanism formed to address the needs of the civilians in the war conflict zone. Just on that, the government formed a committee called Consultative Committee on Humanitarian Assistance. So the representatives are from the government officials, as well as all the non-governmental organizations such as the Red Cross, the United Nations Human Rights Council people, and all kinds of non-governmental organization people were there as well for that meeting. So we have, the OISL has dismissed the CCHA report of an ineffective mechanism, but minutes show that these were substantive, and the extensive discussions and negotiations over various matters between the GOSL officials and the international representatives. So we have the minutes, as you can see, from the 30th of March 2009 as well as the 30th January 2009. The allegation of then the OISL is forwarded allegations towards us that deprivation of food to the civilians purposely. And the government's idea is not that government actually supplied a lot of food to the conflict area by sea and by land as well. And Ms. Sukuma, she was the district secretary, and she has ensured that 1 month's buffer stock of food available at all times. And she had written instruction from Diwarat, the Commissioner General of the Essential Services, to maintain food stocks for 1 month at all time. And next, in the same way, we have a chart. It was the facts given by the OISL and the facts given by our experts committee who investigate the facts of this investigation. So you could see we have provided enough food for the conflict area. Just because of the LTT has a brutal method of holding the civilians, and they could not get their rations, whatever is distributed, and the LTT cadres just came in the disguise of civilians, and some of them blasted in the queues as well to avoid all these efforts that has been made by the government to provide and supply food. And for sure, by the sea, 2,442 metric tons supplied to the civilians at the last phase of the war. So we have all the documentation and to prove that the food and the medical stuff and then the sanitization stuff has been delivered. But as you all know, when there's brutal fighting going on, it is so hard to implement these things 100%. But most of the people who were trapped in there did not die. Nobody died in starvation, and we were running on for sanitary purposes. There are 500 wells. They had clear water in there to drink, and the Red Cross people, they supplied the sanitary, and the government of Sri Lanka also supplied the tents and all the necessary stuff for their day-to-day living. So at the end of the last phase, Mr. Amin Awad, he is the representative for UNHCR. What he has mentioned there is, Mr. Amin Awad had expressed the belief that Sri Lankan was a role model to the rest of the world in the manner in which the government of Sri Lanka had handled the humanitarian crisis caused by the LTT, using civilians as a human shield in the theatre of war, by ensuring that uninterrupted provisions of food and medical supplies reach the people. So that comment, that statement made by the representative of UNHCR, it shows that government has a lot of made efforts and supplied without any doubt for the people of the north, the Tamil people, and they are the people of Sri Lanka, they are the citizens of Sri Lanka, and the government has a right and government has a responsibility to look after them. That is what the Sri Lankan government has done. But at the end, I would like to mention that it is so hard to 100% deliver all these gain all these objectives because the brutal fighting going on. And LTT cadres, what they did was the cooperative shops being looted. They just came and destroyed all the cooperative shops. Some of the food had been stored. So most of the people had to go sometimes without food due to LTT's work. And the other hand, after the war, people have found a lot of paddy lorries that was supplied by the Sri Lankan government of the people of the north, especially Mullaitivu and the Wani area. The paddy lorries were being found after the war. So that another example and another proof that government has provided food for the civilians there. So at the conclusion is the OISL report, the failure to consult the relevant officials and the representatives to obtain proper and accurate details that negates the OISL charge of denial of humanitarian assistance to civilians in the conflict zone. And I have loads of information, the first-hand information and the facts with me if somebody wants to find out what it is. And I would like to conclude my speech regarding the denial of humanitarian assistance to civilians in the conflict zone. And thank you very much, and I'm Suminder Ranapula. Thank you.
As a third element of the charges leveled against the Sri Lankan armed forces, I suppose the presentation about the unlawful killings, but because of the timing, we are a bit behind our time allocated to us. So I'm going to give you just a 2-minute brief, what is supposed to be, but it's not going to be complete as we are intending to do it. supposed to be talking about this subject of unlawful killing, that third element, about the white flag incident, Balachandran Prabhakar's death, Ramesh terrorist leader's arrest, and the death, and the Isai Priya LTTT president's death. And when I go into the first one, when you're looking into the first one, the white flag incident, it is the unlawful killings in the OISL report refers to a number of alleged incidents. The purported killing of Barasingh Nadesan, Udidevan and Nadesan's wife Vinita, killing of Colonel Ramesh, the purported killing of Balachandran Prabhakaran, and the purported killing of the Isai Priya, the LTTT person. When we are looking into the Nadesan, Udidevan and Vinita incident, the allegation here is that Nadesan, Udidevan and Vinita surrendered to the security forces after having been assured by the government that they would be safe, but were shot dead after they surrendered. This is the summary of what the report says about the incident. According to the testimony of witnesses, on the 18th May, Nadesan spoke with Basil Rajapaksa and said he was willing to surrender along with a number of other cadres, including Udidevan. And there are some other details about the way they did the communication, but I'm not going into the details. But I'm going to end with the OISL apart from the evidence and everything they are summarizing, but at the end, OISL report says about this incident, based on the forensic analysis of the photography as well as video material, witness statement as well as the open sources, OISL concludes that there are reasonable grounds to believe that LTT's senior political leader Nadesan, Udidevan and Nadesan's wife Vinita were executed by the security forces sometimes after 6 a.m. on 18th of May. However, this is the important part I am going into. However, further investigation is required to determine the full facts as to what happened and who was responsible for the killing. In other words, they say they are not sure. I draw your attention to that last sentence again to repeat, according to the OISL report's own admission, after reviewing all of their evidence, which includes hundreds, thousands of photos, hours of video footages, dozens of witness testimonies, and so on, they are not in a position to determine who was responsible for killing. I'm not going into the other details about the planet before, and I'm
That
going
is
to.
not their terms of reference. If you look at their terms of reference of OISL report, everything comes under terms of reference. Your statement, that is a statement which was created, that was not part of the.
It is in the paragraph.
That is why, that is the paragraph which says, is further investigation is necessary. Is you understand as a person who deal with it?
No, we all understand, sir.
The statement is saying that we need further investigation. That is why they recommend a panel of hybrid judges and everybody.
But I'm referring is 340.
That is why they are saying that.
Sorry. Let's finish it.
Yeah.
We have one more speaker.
And I'm not going into details of the further paragraphs on the OISL report to the other things, but I'm going to hand over to Mr. Nehmet, Dr. Nehmet to conclude the remarks.
Many thanks, and I would like to say many thanks our dear counter-terrorist friends. To be a counter-terrorist is an obligation to be a human rights defender. But I prepared something about my speech, but very short time. What I would like to say is that, in fact, positive peace in Sri Lanka is prevented by the Human Rights Council and by the OECD report. OECD report is an international wrongful act of Human Rights, High Commission for Human Rights, and the resolution 30/1 of the Human Rights Council resolution is a blank page for the all humanity and for the all human rights defenders, because it doesn't define LTTE as a terrorist organization like the OECD report. Please stop. Now, if there are the crimes against humanity as defined in the Geneva Conventions and Rome Statute, Article 8 things, and you do not define a non-state armed group as alleged as terrorists under international customary international law, you are not a human rights defender. one more thing, please stop. Please respect.
Yeah.
If you are a human rights defender, you should be a counter-terrorist. And it's an obligation to define LTT as a terrorist organization. The black page for the human rights of all the world is that if a criminal organization, one side is a elected democratic government, there can be war crimes in every world, unfortunately there are crimes. This is another issue of the intent. But there, on the other side, there are the warlords. International counter-terrorism. Stop, please respect. First, respect.
Few months ago.
Please respect. As a counter-terrorist, because you are a counter-terrorist and you are a human rights defender. Please stop.
Something.
Okay,
You are
sabotaging me. You are sabotaging me. Stop. The thing is that to bring our obligation as human rights defender to bring positive peace to the island.
Okay.
You know the positive means?
I do.
Okay, negative peace. To stop positive peace, you build the future.
Yeah.
To build the future in Sri Lanka, to create the positive peace,
Yeah.
we should show that the killing of LTT is illegal. It's not a thing of self-determination, all the funny things that has been told here. Nothing can legitimize killing of innocent people. Nothing can legitimize suicide. It's your obligation to define LTT as a terrorist. Stop. Respect more. You will stop. And what is that? Now, there are the problem of immunity because the people should be under investigation. Who prepared OSCE report? But unfortunately, this is a problem in the UN system. What I say is that Human Rights Council Resolution 30/M is a threat to our peace and security. Sri Lanka government has a right to go to UN Security Council against the Human Rights Council Resolution 30/M because it's a threat to our peace and security because it legitimizes and gives immunity for the perpetrators of violence and terrorism and it legitimizes killing of the children. Stop, you are sabotaging me. What I have to say here is that if you are a human rights defender, obligation of counter-terrorism, let's work together to open an international criminal investigation for the finance of perpetrators of terrorism, which is an obligation that Human Rights Council did not do it. Human Rights Council made an international wrongful act because Human Rights Council is not an organization of Security Council. It's under a mandate. United States or China, any country can go to Security Council with their own political point of view. But when the same person comes to the Human Rights Council, it's under the obligation of the mandates that is given to him under the obligation of General Assembly resolutions. Under the General Assembly resolutions, when there are in the reports written OSCE that all the war crimes are made by the LTTE, it's under the definition of terrorism. In the first resolution, Human Rights Council 25/M, the situation is defined as combat terrorism. But OECD report changed it as civil war. It's not a civil war. It's a combat against terrorism. So what has happened in Sri Lanka is combat terrorism. When under the customary international law, all the gross violation crimes that is made by LTT is defined under the Geneva Conventions and Constitution. Under that position, no, you cannot. No, you cannot. No, you cannot. It's an obligation, Human Rights Council, to define LTT as a terrorist. They didn't do it in the Human Rights Council 30/1, and it's a threat to world peace and security. OECD report did not define LTT as a terrorist. As a human rights defender, you should define LTT as a terrorist. If you do not define LTT as a terrorist, all the things are written in the OECD report, you are not a human rights defender. And there is also one more thing. Sri Lanka government has a right to go to the International Court of Justice for the legality of the thing. So, are you against an international criminal investigation for the finance of the LTT? It's an obligation. They didn't do it. Now people say that Sri Lanka government co-sponsored resolution 30/M and obliged to do it. It's an international wrongful act, my dear friend, as a counter-terrorist. When there is an international wrongful act, co-sponsored means nothing. And if Human Rights Council insists on this international wrongful act, it will never work. And there are United Nations Security Council resolutions. Look at the Security Council resolutions on Sri Lanka, on Sierra Leone. It's an obligation to define LTT as a terrorist. If Human Rights Council does not define in the next Human Rights Council resolutions LTT as a terrorist, Sri Lanka government does not have any obligation for the cause of concern of the 30/M resolution, because it's an international wrong flag. We come maybe on the 20 of next week, September, at room 22 at 12 o'clock. I will enter the details. Please leave all your questions to that place. I especially invite you. Also, I can give you a seat. So I don't want any questions. If you are here next week, I will give you a seat for 15 minutes and to talk against me. Are you ready? Are you ready? Please tell me, are you ready? No, are you ready to speak with me in my side event? I will give you a seat.
I'm not here, please.
Unfortunately, but I am ready to answer you.
We are running out of time, we have to leave.
Just only two questions
Yeah.
I am asking.
Yeah.
Okay, here about the side event, I'm not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
But in that, he's talking about Myanmar and supporting Myanmar Act in a different way to whatever the Sri Lanka Act is different. I equate both of them together, they're both the same. That is my statement, that's different.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And
That is your
another question,
statement.
that is my
That is
statement,
okay.
okay? That is my statement. But on the other hand, if you would really want some sort of reconciliation, because it's all right with you
For
guys.
reconciliation, it
You
should
will-
first begin LTT
Yeah,
as
yeah,
a terrorist.
yeah.
If you do not begin LTT as terrorist, there is no reconciliation.
Let him speak. And
If you
then-
want real reconciliation in Sri Lanka, you have to address. You cannot stand behind certain ideology. We are stuck behind certain ideology for 30 years, not 30 years. It's from 1948, certain ideology that Tamils doesn't belong to the island and all sort of rubbish in my house. If you are going to do that, it's going to be, you can have military state. Sri Lanka was in 1833, there were 3 kingdoms. This was well documented.
You are going in-
No, 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 no. It's well documented. And British,
Go to the point. Going to his point. Nothing else. His point, please.
His point.
Please don't go-
You are talking, you are answering for the.
No question, we can start different discussion.
Okay.
Okay?
I just want to tell you, Honorable,
Wait.
the 30 years you had the ideology.
No,
The LTD had the ideology,
No,
that you were talking
no,
about
I am
ideology
not
of
talking
separating
about
the country for two.
Don't
Yeah.
that
Okay. Sorry.
I want to
Money,
bring about the ideology of
Money.
unity state.
Money.
The ideology
Please,
of unity state is not the ideology.
Please,
Why you
reply
want
to
the unity
him,
state?
please. No,
That is based on the Mahavamsa.
we are not here to
I am
discuss
telling
that.
you, based on the Mahavamsa. It's based on Sri Lanka Polish
That's not-
island.
that's not the
That is
point.
ideology I am
That's not the
talking about.
point. That's not
We
the
are
point.
going to separate discussion.
No, just want to tell this another thing for you, just another thing, Honorable. We have been invaded, we have been colonized by the Portuguese, Dutch and the English, right?
Yes.
And during those stuff,
Yeah.
and who fought to free the country and how many Tamil people have died in those wars?
No, single.
Not single. Get the freedom from the Portuguese and the Dutch and the English. None of them.
Tamils
No,
have
come
fought
on,
against
come on,
Portuguese
come on.
and
That is
our-
not the point, but I just answered your question.
Bani region, they fought against Portuguese
Right.
and was
Come to your point again.
We are running out of time, so we can talk about the history.
Yeah, please.
We are not talking about, I think we are going to running out, we are going to finish our
Finish this
session.
session,
And is there any other
We'll
questions?
talk about
I have one answer to you.
Yes.
You asked why not going for this investigation and no one taking the books, right? What you said 450,000 civilians against 7,000 or 450,000 civilians against 40,000. Whatever the case,
Yeah.
why they were not bring to the books, right? You should bring to the book if they were deliberately killed. It's not the case in Sri Lanka. Wait. It's not the case in Sri Lanka. What
Why
happened?
please?
No,
Why you call them into the, why do you call them into a no-fire zone and bomb them?
No, wait.
Nobody
That's done by the
You
LTT.
can give people who have got policy for self.
Let me finish.
Be fair, because
Let me finish. That's not the point. I'm coming to a point. Then you speak. You raise the question, I will answer. Please. Let's do that way. Let's do that way.
That's fine.
Okay? You say no one came to the book. Yes. I don't say killing of children is or happening. It's killing of children is a fair game. It's totally not acceptable. Whether it's Sinhalese, Tamil, Muslim, Indian, Chinese, no, it's wrong. No children has to be killed. But viewing the war, viewing the war, you know what happened in all other places, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, everywhere people being killed, children being killed, right?
Don't compare that, because they didn't call them into an area and invited people, civilians into an area and then sell them and bomb them, saying that. Nobody does that.
Who invited them to the area? That is illegal.
The government for the
No, guys, keep own people as a chef. You give your own people as a chef.
Actually, we are going to conclude our.
Last one. What I want to say, it is because of the 88 Tamil terrorists. They took human Tamil civilians as human sheep. They tied up this small district. It was a crossfire.
Okay.
Because of
Okay.
crossfire,
Can I ask you a question? How many terrorists were there controlling this mass amount of population of 400,000?
No.
And how many terrorists as they call it terrorists? How many of them were there?
Now we are
Controlling, and they are still fighting.
We are running out of time.
Thank you very much.
They are still fight against the army and still want to control these people. How is it possible?
Point is against the ruthless terrorist organization.
They are still fighting against you guys, army personnel.
Thank you.
They are to control these people.
We want to unite them.
Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you.
No, we want to unite them, but you don't for
Thank you very much.
Please join us in some refreshments after the meeting.
Have a tea or coffee.
I can tell you one thing, you're very arrogant. You're a very arrogant man.
You're asking us to be there, but you're not fair.
Be fair.
Even you spy and law, everything, you're very arrogant.
Please leave the ideology behind, then we will be all right.
We never do.
Ideology is a Buddhist country. That's the problem.
No, you say that.
See you later, money.
This is the
Yeah.